There is a specific face that people make when they find out that you have a chronic illness, and you know the one. The head tilts slightly, just enough, and the eyes go soft in that very particular way, sympathetic, a little pitying, maybe a touch fascinated, and then comes the voice, lower than usual, more careful. How are you? I've been receiving that question my entire life, since I was a teenager, since before I was old enough to have an answer that satisfied them. And to be honest, my instinctive response, probably not gratitude. There was a woman, a family friend, someone who known me since I was months old, who did this to me for years. She'd watched me grow up alongside her daughter. She knew my mum really well. She cared, genuinely. I don't doubt that. But every time she asked how I was, there was something in it, a certainty, almost like she already knew the answer. And the answer was not well, never going to be well. I'd say, I'm fine. And she'd look at me like I was lying. And that's what I've realized looking back, is that she'd assigned me a role, a narrative. She decided, without meaning any harm at all, what my story was. And my story, her version of it, was a tragedy. The ancient Greeks, when they did theatre, gave the actors two masks: comedy or tragedy. That was it. Those are the only options. Your story was either one or the other. There was no third mask. Chronic illness, by cultural default, gets handed the tragedy mask. By strangers, by well-meaning family friends, medical systems, content online that talks about diagnosis as the moment everything ended. And I understand that. Tragedy is a tidy framework for suffering, gives pain a shape, meaning, and an arc. It explains why you should feel sorry for someone. But here's what I keep coming back to. Tragedy, classically, ends in cessation. Death, destruction, the final curtain, the thing that doesn't continue. But my life keeps going. So structurally, whenever the content, whatever the pain level, the procedures, the difficult days, the shape of my story isn't tragic. It continues, which means that if I have to pick one of the two masks, yes, it's a comedy. Which brings me to something that I've started doing on TikTok, because I think this is where the theory becomes practice. The TikTok channel is, and I say this with complete affection for it, a chronicle of everyday life inside a slightly unreliable body. A mum with EDS and POTS moving through everyday tasks, school runs, kitchen stuff, family chaos, while connective tissue disorders and autonomic nervous systems behave like experimental engineering. There are clips of my kids shouting things at me. Mum, can I use the scissors? And then me jumping up and collapsing. And there's a bruise counter and door handles that get the better of me. But I want to be clear about what that is and what it isn't. And it isn't minimizing. It isn't actually everything's fine. And it isn't performing bravery for an audience. It's like Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton used to get hit by buildings, literally, like a building facade would fall on him and he'd be standing in the gap where the window used to be, completely unmoved, completely unbothered. You didn't feel sorry for him, you just laughed, because the gap between what the body was supposed to do and what it actually does is inherently, objectively absurd. I just have that gap installed as a permanent feature. Physical comedy isn't reductive, it's translation. It makes the invisible illness visible, legible, recognizable. It says, this is real, this is strange, this is survivable. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes that strangeness is genuinely funny. Tragedy asks the audience to pity you. Comedy asks them to recognize you. And I've always preferred the second one. If you've seen episode 3, you'll know I recently had radio frequency ablation on both sides of my lumbar spine a couple of weeks apart. The response I kept getting was, "Oh, I'm so sorry you've had to go through that." And every time I had to stop myself from laughing, because my actual response was, don't be. I might have just bought myself 2 years without chronic back pain. And after 37 years of having it, that's not a tragedy. That's the best deal I've ever been offered. The tragedy mask gets handed to me constantly, regularly, by kind people with good intentions who have decided in advance what my experience must be. And I just keep putting it down. But here's where this stops being an abstract philosophy and becomes something I actually lose sleep over. I'm raising 3 children with EDS and associated conditions. My daughters are 12 and 16. My son is 8 and has decided he wants to be a footballer or possibly a policeman. He's keeping his options open. There is content out there made by people in real pain, people who are genuinely struggling, people I have nothing but compassion for. And they tell chronically ill people that their sparkle is gone, that their dreams are no longer available to them, that the life that they've imagined is the life that they've lost. And I can't watch that without thinking, my daughters might see this. Because we've already seen what happens when an institution decides to assign a child a tragedy narrative. My middle daughter has apraxia, and her junior school, faced with a child who had a medical complexity, did what institutions sometimes do. They stopped expecting anything from her, stopped trying to teach her to read and write because she had, in their framework, a very tidy medical excuse. She wouldn't affect their statistics, so why push? By the time she was in year 5, she had completely accepted this. If you said to her to ask her to read something, she'd say, oh no, I can't read, without even trying. She'd been handed that mask and she had started to wear it. So we intervened and insisted that they set aside the speech difficulties and focused on her literacy, focused on what she could do. And she went up 4 book levels in 6 months. She now has her own little library of over 200 books and adds to it at every opportunity. 200 books from a child who had been told by omission and low expectations and institutional cowardice that she couldn't. That is what the tragedy mask does when you put it on a child. It doesn't protect them, it teaches them to stop reaching. And I will not, I am constitutionally incapable of standing by while my children are taught that their conditions are ceilings. My son's 8 and his aspirations have barely formed. The idea that he could be already deciding that people like us can't do that would genuinely break my heart. That would be a tragedy. Not the diagnosis, not the unreliable joints, not the POTS or the pain or the days when the body just doesn't cooperate. The tragedy would be the story we tell about it. Comedy, classically, ends in continuation. Life goes on. The story doesn't stop, it keeps moving, keeps adapting, keeps finding a way through. That's my life. That's my children's lives. The masks aren't just aesthetic choices, they're philosophical ones. And I made my choice a long time ago. Not because the hard parts aren't real, but because they are. And I'm still here. We're still here. Making plans, keeping them, laughing at the door handle, carrying water bottles for people who refuse to carry their own. I'm not handing my children a tragedy. I'm handing them a life. The tragedy was never the diagnosis. It was the moment someone believed it meant smaller life. And I'm not prepared to believe that. And I'm definitely not going to pass it on. Anyway.